Hi everyone, and welcome back to Babbling Irons. Doing another show, yes, yet another show throughout this week. This time we'll be talking about the latest rumours that have been flying around this week, which we've seen many of. So yeah, there's a lot to cover. We're only going to concentrate on 4 of the players that have been kind of mentioned. But first of all, let's go with the most prominent one we've been seeing at the moment, and that is Tio Kea, who is currently of PSG. Obviously, we've got a good relationship. You'd like to think after the Areola deal, but it being West Ham, you can never assume we've kept good terms. But also, we've heard that the first bid was rejected. Since gone in with a second bid. So hopefully this will kind of bring about a new centre-back. Obviously, here is some detail on Kera here, but I'm going to hand over you to Sloth to kind of give a bit of background on him and what your initial thoughts are.
Well, I mean, first up, the important thing to say is that he's a very mobile centre-back. He's good on the ball, but he's quite quick. He's not going to challenge Aguerd for pace, but he is quick. He's very tall and good in the air. But he's comfortable with both feet as well. He is right-footed, so I'm not sure where the left-sided issue that we have in the squad is addressed with this. He can play left-back, but he's done it a few times. He's not played them much. He's much more of right-back cover, if anything. But to be positive, he's a quality player. It's not quite worked out for him at PSG, and that is for, well, PSG's strange recruitment policy. They're obviously going to try and look to get Ramos in and hopefully sell some shirts this season. But Kera is probably going to be one of those players they let go, and teams will be kind of scratching their heads why in a season or two. I think he's a very talented player. You don't get Germany caps for nothing. And in terms of him as a West Ham player, like in terms of someone we can relate it to, we haven't really got that many centre backs that I can choose. I'd say maybe Winston Reid, Bolin sort of age era, because of his comfort on the ball and his kind of passing range. But we haven't really seen Aguerd much, so he's a very good pairing. If we're going to play a three of Zuma, Aguerd, and Kera is very, very hard to beat.
It bring a lot of pace, doesn't it? I think to the back line. Yeah. And if you're playing in that three, you've got 2 players wide of Zuma who are, quite frankly, far more comfortable on the ball, more probably progressive with their passing, even though when we look at kind of Kera's stats, he's not necessarily that progressive, even when he plays right back. But again, it gives us that additional offer. It covers another position. I know we're quite blessed at right back, but should Kera come in, that again, should the worst happen, which we see in the centre back, we have a player who can play in multiple positions. But speaking of his flexibility, obviously that's one of the things. But what can that bring, do you believe, to our back line? Not just in, say, in a back three, if we was going to that, but also in a kind of flat back four.
Well, in a flat back four, I think it's something that we can rely on that pace a little bit more, especially if Aguerd comes back to full fitness. I don't want to speak too soon because this is West Ham, we never know. But it gives us something a bit more of an escape route, really. It gives us a bit more of an escape route with pace. And whereas we've struggled with that in the past, I think Kera allows us that bit more cover. He is very good in the air. I know he's not quite as freakishly tall as some of the targets we've been linked with, but He's still 6'2", 6'3".
No, 6'1" apparently.
Is he? Oh, okay.
Yeah, so he's actually a little bit short because the other guys we've looked at, as you mentioned, are 6'3", 6'4" in defence, and I've just seen that the bid we put in was about around 10 to 12 million euros. Obviously, PSG are looking at around 20 million euro. So we are, let's just say, a shade off of what they've requested. But as an opening bid, you would say that's fine. It wasn't clear whether that's the opening bid or whether that's the second one we've gone in with. So I'd assume
that is cheeky.
Yeah. But then as an opening offer, it's what you put in to test the waters as to, are they offended? Are they happy enough to still negotiate? If they're not balking at that idea, then you can probably get them for a little bit less than their 20. So maybe the next one that goes in is about 15, and probably then with clauses as well. But one of the things that I would say as well with Kera is it being a World Cup year, being that Aguerd is also out of the squad, it's a great carrot for Kerr to come to West Ham, in that he's guaranteed to have minutes in that centre-back position. I know some people will probably feel a bit put out because we're saying immediately he goes in above Dawson, but I think we have to acknowledge that we haven't been great in possession, therefore we need a better player in possession. Dawson was making some good kind of passes last year, and especially the diagonals in particular. But Kerr is a step above. There's no disrespect in saying that. He is. But also it's the carrot to go to the World Cup and to be in that Germany squad is going to be such a large motivation, which is also why I'm kind of slightly aggrieved that we let Vlasic go without anyone coming in, because again, the carrot for the World Cup is a great incentivizer for any player, but we'll deal with that one on another day.
Well, the issue about centre backs at the moment, it's not so much quality, it's fitness, and that's what I think a lot of people. It has maybe caught a lot of people by surprise, is that we've given players contracts, or we've kept players and they clearly aren't fit. And once you get an injury, it hits you hard. Now, an injury to Aguerd is the worst case scenario. You can't really foresee that. However, what you can foresee is that a player you tell is your fifth choice centre back might want to leave, and that if you're listening to bids, it's maybe going to get a bit unsettled. I'm not sticking up for Diop at all. I think refusing to play is really poor, but I do think that we make excuses for a lot of players. We hear a lot of excuses for players like Lingard, even players who in the past, they didn't want to play. We've heard it for Payet, but not that
even Arnautovic. Not a prime example.
Yeah, but I just think getting players in who want to be here is big, but also we need to guard against a small squad getting even smaller because of injury, and lack of fitness is huge, because if you're unfit and you go into games that are intense, you're probably going to pick up an injury. Dawson, I think, was fantastic last season. It's nothing against him, but when we say Kera is a step above, I don't think that's in any way disrespecting Dawson. I think it's just acknowledging that this guy's got German caps. He's also playing for PSG, or was playing for PSG, hopefully. But coming into a West Ham squad, you should really be looking at that. And if your other centre-back is unfit, this guy takes precedent. It's not a question of, well, he's been good in the past. He's unfit, therefore safeguard him. And I've said it a lot. It's probably my favourite word of the past few shows, but safeguard your defence, safeguard your squad, and safeguard your options for the long season ahead.
Yeah, I don't think it's also disrespectful to be craving or as a club wanting to improve on players and to go to a next level. I know many will have the conversation around loyalty to players and so on, but loyalty only gets you so far, and we're in a sport where loyalty isn't always rewarded. And the truth is, we're at a crossroads now where we either stick with certain players because of what they've done for us in the past 2 years, such as Dawson. He has surprised all of us, I think, over that 2-year period, and that deserves acknowledgement. There's no shying away from it. But we also have to accept that if we want to grow as a club, then we can't look at those 2 years and go, well, you deserve your final year. That never should be the case. Every single year, every single player should be up for their role and their job. That's just the way football is, the way sport is. So every single year, including Zuma, including Squared next season, players should be looked at as to, can we improve on them and is it viable? And I think that right side to set defence, we need to improve our option behind Zuma, but we also need to apply, I think, pressure to Zuma. There's a couple of times where maybe he's a bit lax. Other times he's an absolute colossus. But again, having someone behind him who is chomping at the bit to get into his position is going to be what we need to get the best out of our players. And I think Kerr will be a good signing should we get him. My concern is that he's predominantly played right back in the last few years for PSG. But if I was to flip that into a positive, is he's played a lot of Champions League football. He's had to defend against some incredibly good players in the Champions League. He was a mainstay in their squad until, say, Hakimi signed last season. And also it's the fact that it means that we have a player that will be comfortable with getting pressed. He will be comfortable with the ball at his feet. He won't be afraid to drive out a defence. If you watch a bit of Kerr when he has played centre-back, sometimes he can put him into a bit of trouble, but he likes to bring the ball out of the back line and actually move in. And as we saw against Manchester City, if you can overload that midfield with an extra player from your defence, it can vastly impact your quality in possession, but not only that, impose upon your opposition. So there are drawbacks, obviously, with a defender when they come out of your defence. But if you're a smart team, and I believe we have a smart team in some areas, and I believe we have a canny enough backroom staff to understand that players who offer different variations and offer something different is actually only going to improve our team. And, it is a good deal. I think we both agree we prefer a left-sided centre-back. But at the moment, this seems to be the preference. So it most likely is due to where he's coming from as to why he is the preferred option. But, again, I guess, as we've said previously, the management have probably earned a little bit of trust in some of these ones. But before we move on to another player who we are both excited by, but also in absolute fear of, you got any final thoughts on Kerr?
I think my final thoughts would be that if he does sign, and particularly if we can get him for around kind of 15 million, if we can get him for under 15 million euros, that's a great deal. I think it would be, personally, I would try and get him on a loan to buy, because I still think we need more in that defence. And again, I think it's a case of fitness. Now, people will say, "Oh, we don't want too many centre backs." I don't buy that. We got loads of games in a very short amount of time.
I don't think we can count on Bonner as being a fourth centre back. If I'm being brutally honest, I said at the start of the season, I doubt he's going to return in the same capacity. So far, that looks to be the case. That's not trying to be, I told you so. It's just a matter of we had to always consider the fact that injury at his age is not going to allow him to come back, and he hasn't come back as quickly as many had hoped. But regardless of that, Dave raises a very good point around Kerr in that, when he was at Schalke as a centre-back, he was a strong centre-back. Completely agree, he's not a natural right-back, but I'm also going to kind of slightly disagree there, because I think he can play on that right side very well as a right-back, but he's not attacking. He's your defensive right back. He's a bit like Johnson, but a level above in that sense. If I was to kind of think of a right back, although Johnson does have some attacking qualities, not always utilised to the best, but, he can. And yes, you're right. Kerr, he has a decent left foot, so he can play on that left side of defence, which he has done for PSG. I don't quite understand where this left back notion has come from. As you said, he's played there a few times. I checked the other day. I believe it's only about 11 times he's actually played at left back. So the majority of his career has been centre back and right back. So to suggest he can play left back seems like a bit of a narrative to maybe spin it positively. He can play across along the back line, but it is at a push. He can be a left back, and I wouldn't expect him to be a marauding left back that we're all hoping to see and hope that we get.
I think you, for my final thoughts, I would say if we can get him on a loan to buy, that's a great option, because I would be looking to spend on a left-sided centre-back. Now, if you want a left-sided centre-back who can also play left-back, go and get Salazar. It's that I think the big issue surrounding him is the quality of the league that he's played in. That's fair enough, but he has made the leap up to international football. He looked very good against England, and he has played European football at a young age. He's got the build that Moyes likes. He's got the height that Moyes likes. He is left-footed, and don't get me wrong, he's not the best player on the ball. He's not going to be Aguerd on the ball, but he's probably about as good as Zuma. Maybe a little, maybe.
Probably, for me, I look at him a bit like a left-footed Milenkovic. That's kind of how I look at him slightly, in that bit no nonsense. He does have a decent enough control, but he's a defence-first kind of player. And if he was going to be playing fullback, it would be like an Ivanovic style of fullback. Someone who's going to look to bully and muscle and run through players before awkwardly crossing into the area.
But I think getting him signed would be a much better deal, not because he's a better player, but because he gives you a bit more stability on that left side. And if you want to play a 3, then a 3 of him on Salazar on the left, Aguerd on the other side of Zuma, whatever way you want to play it, is really, really strong. But if you want to sign Kehrer, get him in, play Salazar on the left, Kehrer on the right, Zuma in the middle, and then you have got buckets of pace, you have got massive units at the back, and you've got players who are comfortable on the ball. Salazar is by no means, going to Cruyff turn and do those things, but he's fairly comfortable on the ball, and having that as an option for if you're 1-0 up against a City, or if you're 1-0 up in a Europa Conference game, then his experience is going to be huge. So I do think he should really be the priority, because he will be cheaper and he will be on lower wages. And whether we kind of like it or not, we've got the left-sided issue, and he's the better fix for that than Kehrer. But I would still like Kehrer. I've said all along I would like 2 centre backs as well. And I just think it's the logical thing to do. But when have we ever seen that at West Ham?
Yeah, no, exactly. And talking of logic and the left side, we need to find ourselves a left back, which, if we are to believe some of the press that's come out of some prominent outlets in Croatia, and also led to believe that Man City have also ceased their interest in Sousa, that's because they are moving for, I believe it's Gomez from Anderlecht. It is an option that both excites and terrifies all at the same time in Sousa. We spoke about him before in terms of defensively. But, let's have some positivity as well as some constructive criticism, I think is probably fair. But before we get into that, let's do the piece that is going to excite people, and I'm going to show his metrics. And now, when you see these metrics, it's very easy to get very carried away very quickly. Because when we look at Sousa, and you can see essentially how he's set up, when you compare him to other left backs and left wing backs, he is incredible when we look at those attacking aspects and in possession. He is in the upper percentile, and in some cases, he's in the 90th percentile, particularly when it comes to expected assists. When it comes to crosses, the guy is pretty much a bit of a phenomenon when we are talking about going forward and attacking. Obviously, when you cast your eye up and look at the defensive side, you can see some warning signs, such as the duels per 90 being so incredibly low. They're basically not on the chart because part of how Stuttgart play, he's not always involved in that defensive aspect, or at least in those defensive duels. But let's first talk about the areas of improvement, shall we say, for Sousa first, and flag up what would be the areas of concern if West Ham were to sign him, and then we can move into the why they could outweigh that side. I'll let you start because there is a list.
There is. We'll get the negatives out of the way. Because when you look at that graph, it is very easy to get overwhelmed by all the green. And you feel a bit like Scrooge McDuck looking at that. You're like, there's so much green there. It's just unbelievable. But I watched a lot of Stuttgart. I love watching them play because they are absolutely hilarious. It was kind of like when Hull had that season with Giovanni and they were just bombing forward at every time. They were caught out a lot defensively, but they were bombing forward and football was fun. Stuttgart are a bit like that. The issue with Sousa is that being the left wing back, you will find that he is very much more the left wing, a left winger a lot of the time. Yeah. Defensively, his tackling is not very good. And he can make some very rash challenges. Now, if I'm going to have my optimistic cap on, I think West Ham fans would love that because there's a good chance that he would just absolutely fly into a challenge. And if it's someone like who's the whingiest, but if it's on Son, West Ham fans will absolutely love it because he will just clean through players. However, that can very much backfire because there's very little control in his tackling. He's not very
impulsiveness, I'd say, in his defending, and sometimes a lack of awareness. I think if anyone's watched, or if you haven't, and you get a chance to see any highlights of the Leverkusen game, 3 of the goals that went in, he has quite a hand in why those goals went in, either through positional sense, through decisions. All 3 came down his side, and he had a hand in them one way or another due to decisions. He wasn't the only person culpable, but he had ultimately the last defining piece, which is why it makes you kind of, for me, it's a bit Masuaku, but a level above. In terms of his quality, he is better than Masuaku defensively. I will say that.
It's not even close.
But again, it's the concentration or it's the rashness in which he engages is what always concerns me with him.
I think we're making it sound very negative, and don't get me wrong. In the Premier League, it could well be because that decision making is so important. However, you're dealing with a player who works really, really hard, and if you can get someone to just coach him and say, look, this is what you want to do, this is how you can improve defensively, his work ethic says to me that he will happily try and apply that as best as he can. Now, if you're also looking to play a 3 at the back, he's probably the best option realistically we could go for.
Oh, because, 100%. If it's a 3 at the back, he's phenomenal talent for that. And I think West Ham fans would be, to say they'll be excited by him in the sense when he goes forward, he goes for it.
No.
When we all talk about we go out and then you go out, that's him on the wing. He doesn't go down the wing; he goes down the wing. That's how he plays.
Oh,
he's touches in the area. If I just have a quick look at this, so bearing in mind what we're used to with Aaron Cresswell, doesn't sound like a lot, but 1.1 touch per 90 in the area. Now it doesn't sound like much, but when you're talking about a defensive player, that's above the kind of the median line, above average. Key passes, he's almost doing a key pass per game, and this is a left wing back, so he's essentially creating per game almost a shooting or goal scoring opportunity. And he got 8 assists this year. He was like 7.64 was his expected assists, but he got 8. So again, he's creating chances that essentially are easy to finish because they are getting done. And another metric I always really like for fullbacks is the deep completions, because it's not quite around the crosses. It's still like a cross, or it's a smart pass along the area, but it's a pass that's basically right on the edge of the 18-yard box.
The corridor of uncertainty.
Yeah, and he drives at the 18-yard area, and then he whips in these dangerous crosses, and he puts them in, and they are very successful crosses. His success rate from crossing is, again, it is incredible. It's 41% of his crosses. This is in the Bundesliga, so defending isn't necessarily of the higher quality, but he whips in over 5 crosses per game and at 41%. Now, if you've got a player like Scamacca, even Antonio, who we know from at the early point thrived on crosses, all of a sudden you're starting to look at it and go, well, that's interesting. We've got Cornet, who is potentially then going to be able to get even closer inside because you've got Sousa bombing on. Now, what it does do tactically is probably change how Declan Rice has to play, because Declan Rice is going to have to shift quite heavily over to the left-hand side if Sousa is left back to cover the space he leaves, which again means Souček will also have to shift. So it could mean that we are vulnerable to a counter-attack if you can get the ball out to our right-hand side, because our whole team is going to have to shift across to cover. Or it means simply we don't commit our right back and we go to a back three out of possession and we hold our midfield as it is. So we kind of spread our defence out and don't commit our right back up as high. So it does have some drawbacks, but again, we're going to be positive.
Well,
it could be great.
Finish off this negative list with just there's if you're going to play him in a back five, perfect. However, Stuttgart have Mavropanos, and he is absolutely rapid. I think he was clocked at about 26 kilometers an hour or something.
One of the fastest players last year, one of the quickest sprints last year, I think.
One of the quickest players in the Bundesliga. What's going on?
£4 million as well he cost them in the end.
£4 million from Arsenal, but he covered Sousa a lot. Now, Stuttgart probably have 4 top quality players. Sousa is one of them. Mavropanos is the other. And the other 2 struggled last season. Silas barely played. We don't know what's going on with him. The season before, he was incredible.
Yep.
But whether he will ever be the same footballer, we don't know. He's definitely not the same person because of his name change issues. Not to make too much of a light of that.
His name, his age, and everything has changed.
Yeah. And then you have also got Mangala, who's not there anymore.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, they're the 4 class players. Now, Silas was injured a lot last year, and a lot of the goals would then be forced down onto Kalashnic. And he was injured a lot last year. He was vital towards the end of the season for saving Stuttgart, but so was Sousa, because Sousa's delivery is absolutely incredible. And that's not just from crosses in open play. His set piece delivery is fantastic. When we talk about a Cresswell replacement in terms of the set piece ability, he's not a replacement, he's an upgrade. And that's nothing against Cresswell.
Exactly. I think from an attacking point of view, it is going to be, to say it's night and day is an understatement.
Yeah.
And I'm just going to flash up these stats again because, quite frankly, they are fundamentally ridiculous. And when you look at it, so sorry, I haven't actually put in the true metric numbers in there, but I'll kind of recall out a couple of them. So when you look at things such as, deep completed crosses, he's in the 97th percentile, which is like 1.99 crosses per game. Again, when we look at the crosses per game, he's crossing 5 per game, or just over 5 per game, and at a 41% success rate. His passes into the final third, again, it's in the 80th percentile. His passes into the penalty area is in the 96th percentile. These are ridiculous numbers.
Yeah.
And even when you talk about crosses per game, again, it's 95th percentile for that. His accuracy, 87th. His key passes is in the 93rd percentile. And this, again, is across left backs and wing backs across the top 5 leagues. And to go from what we have currently, where Cresswell is very good in the progressive passes metric, he's very good in the forward passing metrics, and he's very good in the passing side. But again, progressive passing is always, I find, slightly deceptive because the progressive pass can be anything over, say, 20 odd meters that drive the ball close to the area. Again, a forward pass is a deceptive metric because that can just be a 5-yard pass, 10-yard pass to Ben Rama before he gets it back and he pings it back to him. So it's going to be a huge upgrade. Now, we are maybe going to be a little bit more frivolous in our overall passing on left side because Sousa's passing is so, forward thinking in the terms of he likes to drive possession and push the ball forward. He will take chances in possession with the ball at his feet, and he will take chances when he's passing, which can probably frustrate some.
Yeah.
But when he gets it right, he will be lauded because he is a creative player. And if you can bring, as we saw 2 seasons back when we had Cresswell posting 11 assists in a season, other things get kind of, forgotten in everything else. And Soufal got 8 as well. So if your fullbacks would be able to bring at least 5 assists on top of everyone else, all of a sudden, it's a great thing. And you would argue we have better strikers than Stuttgart or players that are capable of scoring. We may even see the best of even someone such as Souček, who's done a lot to frustrate.
Yeah.
But if we're all of a sudden able to get, bearing in mind he's plays on the right side of midfield, crosses that he relies on have to come from that left-hand side. If we're able to have a player who is able to cross with a 41% accuracy as opposed to Cresswell, which I believe is around 23%, again, almost a 20% increase in productivity on that side is in turn going to see players like Souček getting quality delivery to do the thing that he did against Rangers, where people went, he's back, because he scored a goal and he was driving. Now, he was driving into the area because he knew he was going to get a good delivery.
Yeah.
These things will start to change when we upgrade in certain areas. Could also improve Ben Rama. I know this talk's been going, but again, having a player that relieves him of the pressure of having to stay wide in which to keep the width means that he could be afforded a bit more freedom. And we might start to see the Ben Rama we saw. I think it's fair to say he is stifled and maybe stagnating in the current setup. And I've said it before, I think if we get a left back that can progress beyond him, who can take that responsibility on the ball to go into those wide areas and overlap or even underlap him, it's going to allow someone like him that freedom he needs to move away and explore spaces in a lot more detail than he currently does and potentially be a bit more productive, which again sounds ridiculous because 16 goals and assists and we're saying unproductive is a mind-boggling statistic because how many times have West Ham had a 16 goals and assists contribution from a player and they've been called underperforming, and someone that needs to go, and completely average.
Well,
it's a mind-boggling kind of thing to reconcile.
Even some of the responses to someone posted about Lanzini and Benrahma, and Benrahma's stats and impact, I would argue, was substantially. Well, he was substantially better than Lanzini. It's nothing against Lanzini at all. I know I've been kind of hammering him a little bit, but I don't see why one player is so criticised and so kind of like the rhetoric around him is so negative, and yet the other is well, he can play in the deep, he can play in the middle, and it's like, well, so can Benrahma. But I personally look at it this way. Part of the reason I am kind of persistent with my criticism of Lanzini is I think Fornals is a much better footballer. I think Lanzini was fantastic pre-injury, and I think he can do fantastic things. But I think Fornals in the middle is the way to go. And then I think if you can have a player like Benrahma pushing him, if you can have options like Cornet, all of these players, it's the much better way to go. Now, we're talking about Stuttgart, and I mentioned that I think they have 4 quality players. At West Ham, he's going to have a much better side to play for and with. The defensive unit is far better than at Stuttgart. The midfield unit, Mangala is a great buy for Forest, in my opinion, and it will be really interesting to see if he comes into the side against us. But Rice is levels above. It's not even close. And if we can get Sosa into the team, if we can get the defence playing, and if we get a good, strong left-sided centre-back, if we can get someone like Salazar in there, then I honestly think you cover a lot of the defensive frailties that he does have, but you gain a very, very quick 6'2" left wing back, whose delivery is constantly dangerous. It's not just he gets up and down and he runs a lot. His delivery is constantly quality. And people criticize a certain right back's defensive side of his game, and they often say that his numbers hide that. When you're that good and when you create that many goals, it doesn't matter. It will hide everything. But
if your strengths outweigh your weaknesses, that's effectively what it is. You compensate one way or another. Some player will have to sacrifice something because getting the most out of that outlet takes priority over maybe someone else's game. And that's just a simple truth. And that's how it would be with the likes of Sosa. And we've got to remember that once Aguerd comes back, we're going to have pace in that side. We're going to have a player who's almost press resistant as well. So again, a player that can shift more into that almost a left back position at times in terms of the cover, and also when we're in possession, because the defense can spread and you can push our players up high. Again, we've got a player who can find and pick passes almost at will. He can ping a 40-yard pass and it not really to kind of bat an eyelid. That's how good Aguerd is. But I think we should just kind of wrap up on Sosa as to, that the bid is rumoured to be around 20 million euro. Again, this is, should those rumours be true, we never know when it comes from outside of the UK whether we can trust them, but we will assume that in good faith there is at least a proposal being put into Stuttgart at around 20 million euros, which would seem like a fair deal. I think that would probably get a deal done. I don't think if there was a push for higher, I'm not sure I'd be willing to do so when there is someone like Grimaldo, who is far more an actual left back, which gives maybe a little bit of extra security. Again, not the best defensively, but very good going forward. So I think if the price is 20 million euro and it is going to be kind of agreed, it's a signing that I'm very intrigued by. I have trepidation around certain areas, but as we've kind of mentioned, the output, the positive outputs are to such an extent where you kind of step back and go, they are probably more important, or they're a greater asset than maybe the deficiencies in the game. And also, he's still fairly young at 24. That can be coached. If he plays left back again, he's going to have to be more targeted as to when he goes forward. He's not going to be as marauding as he currently is. So for me, if he signs, it's one that I will be excited about. I will be completely fearful of so many times. But ultimately, is a player that I think would excite West Ham fans. Even if he just goes recklessly into a challenge and clears someone out, we all know being at West Ham, that sometimes gets more of a cheer than a goal. So it's definitely a player that is going to spark debate, I think. Is probably a fair comment on Sousa.
Yeah, I think he's... I would be really excited by it, because I think Moyes could do a really good job with him and develop him forward. I think he's been really put upon in terms of Stuttgart's style of play. They've been so reliant on him to produce as opposed to defending, that when we say he makes those rash tackles, generally he is bombing back, and he's very, very quick.
And I think it's fair to say he does have, of his defensive duels, like he doesn't have many, but he's still at 65% win rate, which is around about what Rom was at. I think it maybe actually been a slight improvement on Rom's. So again, if we were happy and positive about Rom, then I guess we have to sit there and say Sousa's going to be just as good, if not better, potentially.
I think I mentioned him quite a lot, and part of the reason for that is because I think in terms of his pace, his size, and his delivery, he is a really, really top-class option. In terms of his defensive outlet, there are questions there, and rightly so. However, you've also got to look at the side he's in, and I'm not going to say he's as good a player. He can't score a thunderbolt like it, but think of Antonio Valencia at Wigan. And think of when Man United signed him. I remember that was kind of getting a lot of question marks, and people were going, well, I'm not sure about that. There's a player there, but really a Man United player? I'm not saying...
Right back. Absolutely phenomenal. I know where you're going, but what a phenomenal right back he was.
One of my favourite right backs in the Premier League, just of all time, really. I thought but my reason for kind of bringing him up is that attacking outlet is so priceless. And you will find that if a player gives 100%, like Antonio Valencia did every single time he went out, if he's willing to run up and down the line constantly for 90 minutes, and if he gets caught out every so often, then that team, your opposition, are going to know, we've got to catch him here. We've got to make sure that we make them pay. But you've still got potentially a Gued. You've still potentially got Zuma to beat. You've still potentially got one of our other mystery centre-backs who could come in, or Soufal, and then Areola to beat. So defensively, we are a much stronger unit than Stuttgart were. And from central defensive mid, I think we cover that a lot more. Someone with like Rice, again, it would give him so much more freedom on that left-hand side, but also cover him a lot more in terms of teams breaking against them. Stuttgart were really the whipping boys because of how many injuries they had to their key players. And
they're very open as well, Stuttgart, let's be honest. They're an incredibly open team. They are entertaining to watch for the right and the wrong reasons. But and Sousa's played a massive part of that. And should he come to the Premier League, which I think is probably a good fit for him, I think it's always been on the cards for the past year. He will be an exciting player. But let's pass that on Sousa. We've spent a good period on him, and I think it's fair now we move on to the last two. We'll maybe go on to these ones a little bit quicker. But we have potentially, once again, been linked to yet another Chelsea player and yet another potential loan bid. Now, obviously, Gallagher, we've had our overtures rejected so far with Chelsea. But again, that's because obviously Chelsea are looking to bring in players. So you would imagine once they brought in 1 or 2 players, Gallagher's going to be one of those that they're going to be happy to move on. Obviously, there is rumours he wants to stay at Chelsea, but how soon or how kind of steadfast he is in that conversation and that idea is another matter once he starts to see his game time depreciated. Having just broken into the England team, it's going to be nothing but more important for him to play football. And, we've made comments on a particular West Ham player in Lanzini. And this seems like a logical, not necessarily upgrade in the immediate term because Gallagher's still learning, there's still things to come. And when you look at him statistically, it's not something necessarily to shout about when we talk around about how good he is in possession with the ball, But I think what is one of the things we can take away from it, whilst that there are a lot of ambers, there are a good few reds, and his passing accuracy is quite low. When we look at Lanzini, who's been about 90%, 93%, I think, last season, and this is obviously only at 72. I think what we have to be aware of is the way the positions Gallagher gets into as a player. He gets into a place where he can influence in that final third, whether that be scoring a goal. Also, he also got a few assists last year. I believe he's got 3 assists along with his 8 goals, which again, those are 8 goals that haven't come from penalties. Lanzini got 5 last year, 5 goals, 3 penalties, I believe. So again, it's a player that is more effective in open play and a player that is going to not only cause some problems for teams in open play with the ball, but defensively, he works so incredibly hard. And one of the points that you raised in the last kind of conversation was Lanzini didn't even make himself known to Manchester City. I think there's one point where he grabbed a player and pulled him down. That was probably about 5 minutes before he went off the pitch. But Gallagher's not that type of player. If you look back at the City game last year against Crystal Palace, he was a nuisance. He chased every single ball and he was relentless. He hardly touched the ball. I think in one point he only made 1 completed pass in a half, but it was the defensive work and the work he did for his teammates. When he goes off, he's one of the players who's getting the biggest pat on the back. It's not because of what he's done on the ball, but it's the work he's done to ensure that they are kind of in a structure, they are helped, they are supported. And him in a free could be a very exciting prospect because he does have very good pace. Again, one of the only players who I think last year really caused Declan Rice a lot of problems in that game, in the home game. He was someone who, he really did kind of get in behind Declan Rice. His movement was incredible. Yes, James, admittedly, the ball retention of those 3 would make you want to cry. Obviously, we understand Declan Rice's ball retention is incredible. Declan Rice is not the issue. Souček and obviously Gallagher's possession hasn't been the most careful. They haven't been shown as much care. But I think there's another player we're going to talk about after this who if he was to come into a free, would take that ball retention to a whole new level because we'd have 2 players who are exceptional on the ball. And one of those players will be able to find Gallagher as he is terrorising, running between the lines as he did against us. In a game where we should have won, but Gallagher just getting in those spaces absolutely killed us in twice. But that I do think he would be a fantastic asset if we could convince Chelsea. Whilst I'd like to think that we could convince him not to go to Crystal Palace because we do have European competition. We are potentially going further as a club. The one concern is that he had such a good time at Palace last year. He is so rooted in there that he will want to go back because of the ties he had. But we'll set that aside for one moment and be interested to get your take on what you feel Gallagher could bring, whether you think it's a good deal, if we could get a deal for him.
I really like him. I think one of the things that is very easy to forget. And I find myself going, is he really that tall? Is he 6 foot?
Yeah, 6 foot, yeah.
And like, you know, I get accused of kind of having a height obsession with footballers. But I think like...
But with Moyes, it's a valid thing to look at.
Exactly.
He likes players that have height. They have a physicality. It's
an important
you have to look at with a player.
So I think a 3 of Rice, Souček, and Gallagher, while the retention on some of that side might be very tearful, the work rate you're going to get and the distance covered again is going to be huge.
Stifling, I think, is a good way of putting it.
Yes, yeah. I think, I know West Ham fans won't really want to hear it, but if we're being realistic, we could maybe look to take him on loan and say, well, look, he's going to be a counterweight in a potential Rice deal. I don't like saying it, but I think it's probably a fair assumption.
I think it's a fair assumption. I think probably next year there's every chance, should Broja not be sold, that Chelsea will potentially proposition us with money plus Gallagher plus Broja, which isn't great. If we get the right midfielder, then again, if we get a Sangare, that's that Rice player essentially covered. We do need an improvement on Souček still. But again, that can come this year, and maybe we strike an agreement that brings in, say, a Sangare next year. But we do need at least one centre midfielder. We need to understand. We need to probably calculate whether we want to upgrade on Souček or whether we want to embed a Rice replacement now. I think that's probably where we are in the market. As you say, with Gallagher, we know that will be an improvement on Lanzini, essentially within that 3. But again, it's that conversation as to, do we want to entertain that conversation? It's probably, in my view, I agree, time to address the elephant in the room and probably have that conversation with Chelsea as to lining up a potential deal for next year, which means that we can get a couple of players now, whether one be on loan, whether one be on a fair fee, and that then has an impact on next year. I hate talking about it. I hate saying it.
Yeah.
But it's an elephant in the room that we're probably going to have to address at one point, and especially the fact that we have interest in Chelsea players. They know that. We know they want our player.
I think one thing that we're probably kind of glossing over with this is that you're probably, if you want to play a 3, you've got options then. You've got the ability to play Rice and Gallagher next to each other, and you've got that absolute workhorse. You've got those workhorses in the middle, and you can put someone like Fornals in front of them. And he again is another really hard-working player. But you've got players who are skillful on the ball. They can give that ability. And if you need it, you've got an absolute battering ram of a player who can just throw himself at something like a salmon. Now, do I think that Souček is the best footballer in the world? No. But is he a fantastic tool to have in terms of you're 1-1 or 0-0, as we saw in the game against Sevilla, and you need a goal? He's a fantastic tool to have. He's an asset. Now, with the type of football we play, which is so cross-heavy, Gallagher is going to be a really good kind of counterweight to that, because while he is 6 foot, I don't think I've seen him really kind of trouble too many defenses in the air. What he does do, though, is he really mops up the scraps. And if someone delivers a cross,
ball player, isn't it?
Yeah.
But I guess I kind of want to ask this question, that coming from Connor, is do you think he will help us unlock a low block? Now, my view is no. I don't think he has the pass ability. He can get between players in a low block, which some may argue can unlock it. But you need a player to pass to him in which to unlock that. I would argue, you could say he is the key, but you need someone to pass that key into the lock. So I don't think he's necessarily the player who can break the block. But if you can get a player who can find him in those pockets, his movement will do that. I don't think him on the ball is necessarily going to do it, but I think his movement could.
He's the player who can run in behind that man and score. He's the player who can create the chance for that to happen. And I think if you had a Ben Rama or Fornals with them, and you've got Gallagher who's tirelessly kind of running at defenses and trying to stretch them, trying to break a low block down, he can do that. But to say that, I think a lot of West Ham fans have this notion that we need creativity because they want another Payet. And I don't mean that in any disrespectful way. We all want another Payet.
I don't think it helps that even Moyes has come out and said he needs more Payets in his team, but I think it's probably been misconstrued. What he means is game changers and match winners. I think that's what he's referring to.
If you speak to any Palace fan, they will tell you Gallagher gave us that a lot last season. He gave us that kind of ability to win a match. And do I think he'll help us break a low block? No, but I think he can help you dominate. I think he can help you break. And surely that is what we're looking at Ben Rama, Cornet, Scamacca, and Bowen to do. Gallagher, I have no doubt Gallagher could pick out Bowen with ease, help break that block. He can pick out Cornet with ease, and he could play an excellent through ball to Scamacca. But the problem is the finishing from us hasn't always been there, but the pace has been so lacking. And Gallagher gives you a bit more pace. He gives you the ability to release the pace on the wings or down the middle.
He's a great foil for Scamacca as well. He'd very much be like how Raspadori is, because he will be a constant buzz in and around him to run in behind, to be ready for those knockdowns. As you already said, he's a player that is not scared to get involved. Just to lighten the mood, because it did kind of make me chuckle. Yes, James, if Sullivan was involved, it probably would be £10 for Declan Rice and Marco Van Ginkel on loan. But fortunately, his involvement in transfers is far less involved. But again, Connor, you're right. The link play and the potential build-up kind of work between Scamacca and Gallagher would be very interesting because of the way Gallagher plays, the way he has the energy to consistently try and get ahead. He has that Lampard-esque ability in which to arrive in the area. If he can work on that more, then he could probably bring more goals than what he did last year, which was 8 goals in the Crystal Palace team, which doesn't necessarily score very many in terms of numbers. Now, they were a different team last year, but when I said they didn't score many numbers, is Zaha's normally the highest goal scorer, and he's normally around about 8, maybe 10 goals.
Well, just to kind of caveat, well, remember they had Eze out for a very long period. They also had Olise. They kind of didn't really play him as much as they could have. He was kind of in and out the side. I don't really know if he had that many injuries off the top of my head, but that's the source of a lot of goals for them. And Edouard didn't really feature that much. I know he was kind of being eased into the side, but those are players that you would be looking at to score a lot of goals and feature very heavily for Palace. So what you're looking at is a player who really pushed Palace forward. He got them results. And if you speak to any Palace fan, they will tell you he was huge for them. So I personally...
He won his England cap whilst at Palace. He didn't win that with Chelsea. He didn't win it off the back of being a Chelsea youth player playing well somewhere. He got that off the back of being an incredibly important player for Palace and being such high energy, play high intensity. He won that basically off the merit of actually being a very good player and putting in stellar performances, as opposed to some young players that we see almost get a pick because of who they play for and because they've played okay. This was a kid who absolutely grabbed his chance to show what he was about with both hands. And really went about it. And obviously, again, it's a kind of amusing one because of how bad he has been in his first opening game. But obviously it would be a very tantalising thing to see those players playing against, say, Lissandro. Obviously, let's not get too confident. He is going to bed in. He is going to be a better player. But obviously, one of the disadvantages he has against Scamacca is that he has to virtually jump a foot just to get to his head height. So,
if I am being a kind of more forward planning, for me, this is an absolute no-brainer for Chelsea. For Chelsea, this is zero risk because you loan him out, and let's face it, he's a very good player, but is he a Chelsea player?
Yeah,
no, potentially not, and I don't mean that in any disrespect.
I think it's true. See, when you look at Callum Hudson-Odoi, same thing.
Yeah.
He's a very good player, but is he a Chelsea player? Probably not. Hence why Dortmund are looking at him.
Yeah, but he can come to us. He's going to get a lot of minutes. He's going to get in the squad. He can potentially even go on and win the Europa Conference League with us. That is going to do more than anything that Palace could do, or who else could they loan into? Maybe Brighton. Very good side, but again, winning the Europa Conference League is going to do a lot more for his price tag than playing for any of those sides would. So if he did that and builds his price tag up to, say, 50 or 60 million pounds, then Chelsea are laughing because they've got a huge asset there that they can move on. They know they can use against players.
Yeah, and I think if you look at the Brozier chases, Bewley didn't want to sell Brozier because his view was that putting him on loan means they can get potentially another extra 20 million because obviously he performs well. So again, as you say, if Gallagher goes on loan, he's probably valued around 30 to 40 million now by Chelsea. Maybe a little bit expensive, but it's a seller's market. If he has a good World Cup, comes to a club like West Ham, performs incredibly very well, and there is some silverware such as the Europa Conference League, or at least a very strong finish in the league, then granted, Chelsea will be laughing because they will all of a sudden have a player that's going to be rated probably 20 million more. They also then going to have a player that if he's performed well for West Ham are definitely going to want to have, and they're definitely going to want our player. Now, if we win a trophy, it might be harder for them to prize Declan Rice, but also may also have Declan Rice going, this is now my time, I need to go. Which then gives them that thing of, well, we have Brozier, you want him, he was your top choice striking option. We also have Gallagher, who was incredible last year. We'll put those in the deal and probably offer you around 40, 50 million pounds plus those two players if we're going to essentially be steadfast on this 100+ million deal. We may have to eat that up and kind of maybe take 60 million plus those two. Which maybe isn't a great deal in some ways, but then ultimately, if Gallagher was to perform like he did for Palace last year with 8 goals, not going to find many centre midfielders that can score that many goals or be that important. Again, if we was to get Brozier as part of the deal, again, that's our long-term striking option with Scamacca. Another 6'4" player in there as well, which again, and that's Moyes' number one option. So whilst we're losing a big player, I do believe we could then look at players like Kone, for instance, if he's still at BMG, who could replace Rice. He's not at the same level. We'll 100% be clear on that. But it's a player that has many of those qualities. But let's wrap it up on Gallagher and to get your final thoughts. And then we'll talk about the man, I think, who can help us unlock a low block after that.
I think this is a deal that makes the most sense for both parties. For me, I think Gallagher is a player that the fans will really like. He gives you that Mark Noble work ethic. He gives you that kind of figurehead on the pitch, but he's got goals in him. He's also got a lot of ability that I think kind of gets lost in the mix of things. He works so hard for the team, and I cringe every time I say that because I think of that old man on the Man United channel. He works so hard, but like he will put himself all over the pitch, and you can watch him and know that even if he's had an off day, he's run himself into the ground, and there's not much more you can ask from someone than that. We see it all the time with Antonio, that if they work hard, fans generally go, well, that's all we can ask. Now, he's got the ability to do a lot more and create a lot of goals. If we're adding 8 goals into our team and 3 assists, and then you've got players now increasing the quality of the squad, then, you know, he could potentially hit 10 goals, 5 assists next year. And for a youngster, well, I say youngster, but like for a young player,
22, so he's still a young player.
Yeah, for a young player, that's excellent. So I think go to Chelsea, be realistic and say, look, we will give you a good loan fee. We've got potential money that we can give them. I know that sounded really that's really dense, but we've got money that we can give them for a good loan fee, and we won't be struggling with his wages. We can pay 100% of his wages. And if at the end of the season we just say, look, it's a dry loan, we know what you're going to try and do at the end of the season. Let's see what happens. I don't think Chelsea can ask for a better deal.
And I think your T-shirt is very apt right now for that last statement.
Yeah. You know, I was going to try and go with "See you later, Space Cowboy," but you know, it's I don't want a negative transfer fund. But with Gallagher, I think it makes us a really different proposition because it's got work rate, it's got the ability to score goals, but also he can play in that more advanced role. He can drop back, and he gives us a bit more versatility and depth. So I'd be really excited with it.
Yeah, I agree. I think that the high intensity levels they can bring to the midfield are a great prospect for us, and it's something that we've probably been lacking, especially when we look at games like Brighton, where we have paid the price of not having a high enough intensity in midfield to match the 3 that they have. But before we move on to the last one, you know, Jason, thanks very much for joining the show. Really appreciate it, mate. Glad you're enjoying it. But the last kind of chapter, shall we say, of what we said was going to be a short show tonight, which has already gone past the hour mark. We're going to talk around obviously who we know. If you've followed the channel for a while or even followed me on Twitter, you will understand is a player that I am slightly, you know, positive about. But we have put an inquiry in as to Coop Miners. Obviously, the initial point is that it's going to be a difficult deal. Quite frankly, I don't care. It's a difficult deal. If it's a player and they're a good player, it should be difficult. We should be looking at deals that are complex and hard to get over the line, because that shows ambition. It shows you're looking at players that are wanted, are desired, and they have a skill set that is of a high demand. We shouldn't be looking at players that are just easy to pick up, because there's normally a reason why they're easy to pick up. I'm not going to say the player that I've been talking about, but he plays at Blackburn and it gets said way too much. But we should be looking at players that are tricky for us to kind of pull off, and ones that we have to encourage to sign. I don't care if a player says they're initially not interested about West Ham. I know that wrangles some fans, but we should be selling ourselves to players. We should have players going, I want you to sell me the club and the vision of the club. In some cases, it's great when we have a player who wants to come to us and actually selling themselves. That's also fantastic. But sometimes you need to actually be in a position where you go and sell a player. And when that player is then sold into the dream and sold into the club, that is what you want, because that player is chosen to take you. Skamaka is a prime example of a player that we sold the club to. If you can sell a player a dream and a vision, you can get these big players. So I'm just going to kind of flash up as to, you know, for those who don't know Coop Miners, or those that are not necessarily aware of him, we did do a scout report. Again, we have a pinned tweet where this is currently there. So a nice little plug there for our Fred. But when you compare to what we have in midfield now, and in particularly in the spot where we have Souček, this is a player who not only is tactically flexible and being able to play pretty much across the entire spine of the team, bar goalkeeper and striker. This is a player who fits many things that we want. We want a player who is comfortable in possession, who can essentially break a low block with passes between the lines. We want a player who is and has very good set piece delivery. This is a player who can do that. He's also incredibly strong penalty taker as well. And before he went to Atalanta last season, I think he came off the back of an 18-goal season for AZ Alkmaar before he got sold on to Atalanta, went to Atalanta, and also, again, put in the performances, put the goals in as well. I think he scored about 5 to 6 goals last season as well for Atalanta. And at one point in the season, and as you can see in the statistics, he's a very consummate passer of the ball. When we talk about the potential goals and assists, I think his assist rate, he was slightly let down by his teammates because his expected assist to his assist is far greater. But this is the type of player that he is. He can pass between those lines. He can find a player relatively easy. Now, there was a tweet the other day saying that someone had watched him for the Orange. If you're not au fait as to who the Orange is, that's the Netherlands. But again,
don't let it get under your skin, Mike. Just breathe.
The thing that we need to understand that when you watch him for, say, the Orange or the Netherlands, is that he plays a far more kind of defensive role, or a role where he is second to Frankie de Jong, who again is incredibly world class and can make anyone by comparison look at times average. But again, his role is to facilitate possession and to find Frankie de Jong or to find players in other positions. Given a bit more freedom as he was at Alkmaar or even at Atalanta, he is a player that can dictate play. He can create. He also does what we like with Souček, in that he can get in front of the attacker and go in and score. He also loves a long-range shot as well. And if he's a left-sided footed player on the right side of midfield, like we see with Declan Rice, it can open up the pitch as well, because you're able to pull on your left side and hit the diagonals out to the left and so on. So for me, I always find there's a lot of positives with him. Defensively, he could do more. He was much better at Alkmaar, but again, it's a weaker league. This can't hide away from that. The Dutch league is a weaker league. And in Atalanta, he's been afforded the luxury of not having to defend as much. But I'm going to stop with my praise of Koopmeiners and pass over to you, Sloth, so you can probably give maybe a little bit more balance to my excitement as to whether this prospect.
I think it's a fantastic link. I think he's a brilliant footballer. My inkling is that Atalanta will be willing to sell. I think they'll say they won't, but if we put in an offer around £30 million or similar to the Onana deal, I think they take it because they paid, was it 12 or 14 million pounds for him?
Almost 18 million euros.
Yeah, it's not a big deal. And for a club like Atlanta, who, they need money. It's not like they are constantly taking in big money, and they're not the most marketable team, so they do kind of struggle sponsor wise in terms of the money that they bring in. But player sales are huge for them. Now, if you can have the chance to make 3 times the money on a player you've just bought for clubs, even for West Ham, that would be huge. Ben Rama's got 17 goals and assists in all competitions. And I'm not saying by any means he's a £90 million player. But if you instantly came in and said, we're going to give you 3 times what you paid for him, teams would bite your hand off. And
yes, it's like what you said before on other ones, is that it's knowing when to sell. And with Koopmeiners, arguably, he may not have the same season this season at Atlanta. So after those 2 really positive seasons he's had, there's every chance that he's maybe not as good. Not necessarily going to be true, but there's always a chance. We never know. But at this point, it's probably where his value is at its highest, especially the fact that they are, well, last year actually would have been at its highest because they were in the Champions League. But again, they don't know if they're going to get Champions League again. So this is possibly the highest he's going to be for them in terms of his value. Another season where they maybe don't qualify for Europe or for Champions League could see that price depreciate even further. So it's about knowing when to sell. And if you say we're offering 3 times or even twice the amount, that's probably going to be a tantalizing and interesting proposition.
I think in terms of his ability, though, because to move on to the player himself, he is a very, very technically good footballer, but he'll give you the work rate. If we were looking at a 3 next year of Gallagher, Koopmeiners and Rice, that's one of the best in the league. It's that level. If you then add Souček in behind as an option, again, that's massive step up in quality from the teams around us.
You also then have Fornals as a backup to Gallagher, or even Gallagher back up to Fornals. So again, it's that depth that we've talked about, that safeguarding of positions in your team and your squad.
And I think Koopmeiners gives you so many different ways to hurt a side. He's great on the ball, but he's got that physicality. He's a strong footballer. He's not the quickest, but he's got a decent turn of pace. However, with the kind of players we're talking about, with Sosa, if he's on the left-hand side, to pick him out, even if it's just a ball across the area, like a low ball, Koopmeiners is the kind of player who can run in and finish that ball across the box. He's got that ability. But he will cause opposition players an absolute nightmare because he can run onto the ball. If it's one, if Sosa delivers across and they get on the end of it, he loves a long range shot and he will hit it. He will hit and that.
Normally very much on target as well.
Yeah. And I think there are so many strings to the bow of this player that really, I think when we talk about £30 million, I think it would be a really, really good deal.
Yeah, so, I imagine they would push us to the level we were talking around with Zielinski, because obviously they've seen the money that is essentially available at West Ham. Let's be clear, we've put that money down for Onana, put that money down again for Zielinski. So there is going to be a knowledge that there is that number, and I imagine they will probably say, well, it's going to be around about 45 million euro, 50 million euro, but there's every chance that they could settle at a 38 million. This will probably be a longer deal to manage, but midfield's not our priority at the moment. I think we can wait. I know Souček has frustrated, and he does frustrate, but we still got to remember that when that midfield works, it has been one of the best pairings in the Premier League.
Yeah.
We have to show a little bit of faith in there. Obviously, the Man City game wasn't a great watch, but I think many players were at fault in that game, not just individuals that have been picked out. And again, we can arguably still persist with those for the next, about a month, isn't it? It's less than a month, in fact, actually. So we do have time to make a deal work. We just maybe have to be patient. And should we get them, I think the thing that me and you have constantly said is finding players that take you up 1 level or 2 levels. Koopmeiners arguably takes you up 1 to 2 levels. If you can bring in Gallagher, that certainly means your midfield as a whole goes up by 2 levels, because that work rate and his ability in line with those guys. Like I said, get Sosa on the other side. All of a sudden, you've got a player you can ping the ball out to who can then whip it into the box to create havoc. And we've got potentially 2 strikers who thrive on havoc in Scamacca and Antonio as well. So the 4 deals we spoke about today, one is I wouldn't say it's incredibly exciting because it's a centre-back, but can work as a centre-back in a 2 or in a kind of 4 or in a 3. And again, in a 3 would be great proposition. When we talk about Sosa, whilst we understand there are limitations in certain areas, the ultimate package that he can bring is incredibly exciting, especially from an attacking point of view. And I think, as a set of fans, I think we probably quite like to see a marauding left back with some problems. I think it's just within us to see some kind of players that are a little bit of a maverick, I think, in that sense. Midfield, we know we need to improve. And the two players like Koopmeiners and Gallagher are great assets if we can get them over the line, because it resolves those two fundamental problems we have in midfield, in that maybe that sitting creator that we don't really have. I know people say it's Rice, but if we're going to be honest and diplomatic about it, Koopmeiner's passing in that regard is a level above where Declan Rice currently is. And he is that player that can sit maybe even a bit deeper to Rice and pull strings, whilst Rice is being that kind of more box-to-box element. If you can get someone like Gallagher, or even if you've got Fornals playing there, got incredible work rate in that role, but also players that are maybe a bit fast and loose with possession, but that's because they're trying to create. They're not scared to make a mistake with the ball, and they're looking to be penetrative with their passing. Gallagher, obviously, as we know, will look to score as well, which is fundamentally what we want out of players. But yeah, I guess final thoughts, Sloth, on 4. We've talked about where we are at the moment, and then we'll kind of wrap this up and end what we said was going to be a short show turned into an hour and a half. So,
I think for me, Sosa is a really, really good option, really good buy, and he can change so much about how we play. But I'll caveat that with, he would be a world-class signing if we get someone like Salazar in, who shores up that defence on the left side, gives us a lot more options, and has a lot of potential to cover him more than someone like Kehrer would. Gallagher and Koopmeiners, for me, they would be two huge statements. I think we need to get away from this idea that a statement signing has to be someone who is attacking, or has to be someone like Paqueta, who is fantastic. But for me,
he would call it Fancy Dan.
I think if you bring in Koopmeiners and Gallagher on loan, even if it's just a loan, a dry loan with no option to buy, that is way more of a statement than just Paqueta, in my opinion anyway. So those 4 players, Salazar, Sosa, Koopmeiners and Gallagher, for me, that takes us to a 10 out of 10 window. Yeah. Because it changes how we play.
I'd still say we need a left back for it to be a 10 out of 10, but I'm willing to go with you.
We've got the ability. Well, the thing that would take it to a 10 for me would having Salazar there, but also having the option to have Cornet there as well. Have that left back who's not, the most defensively sound, but you've then got 2 absolute flying machines, to quote Ray Wilkins, the great Ray Wilkins. Yeah. But you've got 2 players who can just cause absolute mayhem up and down that left-hand side. You've got the defensive rock behind them, and that's before you even get Aguerd to come back into the side and have that pace to cover any issues on that left-hand side. For me, I think that would make it a 10 out of 10, especially if you add the defensive quality of Koopmeiner, and the work rate of him with Gallagher and Rice. For me, that's fantastic.
Yep. So on that note, let's end it there. If we can bring these 4 in over the next few weeks, then we are potentially not only going to see a brand new West Ham, we are going to see potentially some incredibly exciting football. But last kind of bit of housekeeping, really. Yeah. If you aren't following us, please do follow us on Babbling Irons. We will be doing threads on players as and when we can. Obviously, we will always be talking about what's going on in the football world of West Ham. And if you do like this video, this very long video, please do like and subscribe as well. But without further ado, that is it from us, from another show. And there's one thing left to do, Sloth, and I think you know what that is. Come on, you Irons.